Hi everyone, and for week 18 of my Know by Year, I'm going to go into a little bit of my story of shopping, money, and me, and see if I can get at some of the root causes of my shopping problem. Hey, I didn't see you there. Okay, I did that intro once before in my video on things to do instead of shopping, except I played a little guitar. So if you want to see that, I'll put a link up here somewhere. But viola is what I actually do most of the time. So here's a little bit of me in my natural habitat, so to speak. All right, let me get set up for the rest of this video now. Let's get rid of this thing. All right, now it's just me again. So I wanted to go through basically my loose life story and kind of go through all the stages I've had, major events, and the jobs I've held so that there's kind of a background for what might have caused my shopping issues or, you know, the feelings that I've been having over my life and not dealing with in terms of choosing shopping as my source of self-soothing. Let's just get right into it. So I was born in the United States. My parents were from England and South Korea. So I was an American by birth, but my parents were not American culturally. And we lived in South Dakota, actually, while I was a small child. And those of you who have seen some of my wish lists with my Badlands sweatshirt on there knew that I had some South Dakota connection, and that's kind of why I wanted that sweatshirt in the first place, which I did actually end up buying and wore in, I think, my last video. Yet again, evidence of my shopping issue, even based on the personal ties I have in my life story. So I grew up in South Dakota in a small town called Vermillion with a population of about 10,000 people. Now, when the town is that small and in the Midwest, there were a couple of issues. I don't want to say cultural issues, but I guess socially, when I was a kid growing up, I always felt like an other because despite only being half Asian, to the other people who lived in that small town, I looked fully Asian and was kind of considered more exotic and weird sometimes and different. And, you know, I got all this traditional stereotypes about being good at math and all that. And I was actually good at math when I was young. That kind of went out the window in high school, but I was gifted academically, you could say. My best friend at the time her parents were from India. So you could say that we kind of, the others congregated together. And I have many stories from my childhood where I felt strange, I guess you could say, or I felt embarrassed by my heritage. I already told the story in my Failing My Know by Year video about the time that I went to a soccer game and had the wrong attire and just felt so uncool. And there were other times, like when your parents came to school for show and tell, where I would feel kind of ashamed of being partly Korean. And apparently I used to speak Korean with my mom before I went to school, but when I started going to school, I started saying, hey, I don't want to be Asian anymore. I don't want to speak Korean. And I rebelled against her trying to teach me her language, which is one of my biggest regrets in life up to this point, actually, is that I can't speak Korean. I can still read the alphabet phonetically. I can pronounce the words when I look at them, but I have no idea what they mean. I think I need to buckle down and sign up for a Korean class or something so that I can try to rectify this, because whenever I have to tell people I don't speak Korean, I keep feeling that sense of lingering shame about what I did kind of to my mom as far as pushing her away in that way and pushing away her culture. Anyway, so I grew up in South Dakota at a small school. There were about 100 students per grade. I was one of the few Asians. I got the stereotypical ideas applied to me about being good at math, about being nerdy. I even got some mild racism, people telling me to go home to China and stuff like that. And as a kid, this stuff kind of, you don't know how to process it. You don't know how to fight back or internalize that kind of feeling of not being like everybody else. And I think the instinct is to try to be like everybody else. And on the surface, the easiest way to do that is to look like everybody else as far as what they have, the choices that you can make. Because you can't choose your ethnicity, right? You can't choose who your parents are or what color your hair is or how you look, but you can choose the clothes that you wear, or you can try anyway. Obviously your parents at that age are still going to have final say, And I didn't have full control over my wardrobe for a long time, actually, but it took a lot of negotiating in high school to try to start buying my own clothes and fit in that way. So I guess fast forwarding a little bit to middle school, one of the notable things that happened was that I was diagnosed with scoliosis. So luckily this is not something that affects my life in a major way, but at the time it was progressing and I had to wear a back brace. So scoliosis is the curvature of your spine, so I have an S-shaped curve. You probably have seen it in my outfit videos though. Maybe I should link my Doing the Vibes for the Tibby Sid jeans, because there were some outfits where I wore some tank tops without a layer on top and you could see my curvature of the spine. So I had to wear a back brace for a couple of years. And in middle school, this makes you super cool, right? Even though my back brace was under clothing, it was still something that forced me to be different again from the other kids. I had to sit up like this in class all the time. And I was already tall for my age. So when the seating arrangements put me in the front of the room, I would be blocking people and I couldn't do anything about it. I couldn't slouch or anything. My back brace kept me up. Not everybody could tell that I had a back brace because I wore baggy sweatshirts all the time because I wanted to hide it, right? But I had this thick plastic layer of abs of steel all the time. I even wore it during gym class. And the girls in the locker room got to see it when I changed into my gym clothes and all that. So that was not a super fun experience. I guess that's the age where you're kind of starting to develop your own style and trying to figure it out and fit in and try new things, but I was kind of hampered by having that back brace. So then high school comes along and I get to wear my back brace for less hours of the day and then eventually only at night. So I could wear whatever I wanted at school, woo, yeah. And I started noticing what the popular cool girls would wear. Throughout all this time, I tried to fit in more and more by playing all the sports available. I learned violin from my dad at an early age. He's a musician, and he taught me and my brother. I have one younger sibling from when we were really little, so I didn't really have a choice in learning music, but I don't regret it now, obviously. That was a rare thing in my small town, too. My school did not have an orchestra. We had band, but no orchestra. So I was a weirdo for many different ways, right? Being Asian, playing a classical instrument, having scoliosis and a back brace. So I really tried to mitigate this by playing sports, trying to get as good as I could. I was actually pretty decent at volleyball and track. I did hurdles and sprints, and I went to state during my freshman year, which for South Dakota is not that big of a deal, but hey, it's something. So I was really trying to counter my weirdness by trying to dress like the popular girls and wear the trends. So at that time, it was those shirts like those Ed Hardy and Sinful and Affliction type shirts, or shopping at Hollister and Abercrombie, Aeropostale and American Eagle, having those stupid shirts with the logos emblazoned all over the front with really no style whatsoever, but, you know, having the right jeans and the right shirts and it was all t-shirts and hoodies in a small town in the Midwest. Microscopic mini skirts, denim mini skirts. I remember my parents being scandalized at me trying to leave the house in some of those. Anyway, and then after my freshman year of high school, when I was about 14, 15, we moved to New Zealand because that's where my dad's family lived. For those of you who've had to make a move during your childhood or teenage years, you might recall how difficult that can be, especially if you don't want to go. So I was in high school and I finally felt like I was getting somewhere as far as fitting in, playing the sports, doing the right things, wearing the right clothes, starting to get accepted because people grow up in high school and stop being so scared of people who are different, I guess. Just as this was happening to me, I was torn away and I had to start all over in a country where I didn't want to go. And looking back, I actually am thankful for this happening to me because I think it made me a much more well-rounded and interesting person. I learned a lot, obviously. But at the time, it was devastating. I cried at the airport. I really didn't want to go. I probably made it a really rough time for my parents moving. My friends made me this really beautiful scrapbook that I was carrying in the airport of our memories. And I guess the other thing is also, since then, the friendships I've had seem to have come and go. And this is another aspect of my shopping problem that I've already talked about, kind of being lonely. So we're in New Zealand now. I don't really have friends, right? Because I've just moved. I'm meeting new people and I'm doing new things. I'm disappointed by the sports scene in New Zealand because it's a lot more casual than team sports were in American schools. I'm disappointed in the debating team. I was in that in America too, but it was a lot less intense. Basically, just organized school activities are just less intense, I think, probably everywhere outside of America. We kind of take things super seriously here, even at a young age, which I have mixed feelings about now, right? Why are we doing that to our kids and stressing them out? Anyway, I was in New Zealand. I was disappointed by all of these things. There was an American girl who was on an exchange there with her mom, and she became my best friend. And when she left, I actually felt like I had nobody for my last year there. She was there for what would have been my junior year. And when she left, I felt like I had no friends. And I tried to focus more on my violin playing so I could audition for and go to college in violin performance, which is what I did. So after that, I went to Wellington, New Zealand for my Bachelor's of Performance at the New Zealand School of Music. And I was finally free. I was on my own. And while I was in high school in New Zealand, I was still doing clothes shopping. I was shopping at op shops a lot, which is what they call secondhand shops in New Zealand. I was watching a lot of content online. So this might have started by consuming music content for my studies, right? My violin, with all the recordings being available for pieces I was playing. And then the social media creators on YouTube started getting more and more popular, the personal creators, right? So I remember some of the first channels I was kind of obsessed with were like the British creators like Zoella and Tanya Burr, Naomi Smart, all those girls. And they, especially Zoella, would do like makeup hauls and Lush hauls and videos like that, cozy things from her bedroom. And I really related to this and loved her content at the time. So I would buy a lot of Lush products. I mean, I didn't buy the bath products because I never had a bath. I always had showers when I was at college. So I kind of lamented that I couldn't try the bath bombs and bubble bars and stuff, but I tried everything else that I could. And I was starting to earn my own money. So I was fortunate enough to receive a scholarship that covered most of my tuition for my first year. And then each subsequent year I got scholarships for a few $1,000s, and the tuition in New Zealand was only about $5,000 to begin with. And I also had teaching, private lessons, and gigs. And then in New Zealand, there's a student allowance. So depending on your parents' income, the government will actually pay you weekly while you're a student to subsidize your living costs. So I was getting an income all of this time and spending a portion of it. And I did save a portion of it too. By the time I finished my studies and went back to America, I had enough money to pay for a certificate program in Pennsylvania. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So I did my bachelor's in violin in New Zealand. I did a year on top of the bachelor's for my viola studies. I wanted to switch in my third year, but they wouldn't let me because I was so close to the completion of my violin degree. So I did another year in viola, and then I did a fellowship with the Auckland Philharmonia, which is where my parents lived at the time. They had moved from Nelson, the small town we moved to first in New Zealand. I don't think I mentioned that before. So we moved to Nelson. I went to study in Wellington, and my family moved to Auckland for a job for my dad. I did a fellowship with the Auckland Philharmonia on the viola, and then I did a certificate year at Pennsylvania State University in State College, Pennsylvania. And this was a program that was about $2,000. I paid for this out of pocket with the savings I'd made from the fellowship program, as well as just teaching and working. And teaching music is a very privileged skill to be able to have. The minimum you might get for an hourly wage is maybe like $25 or $30 per hour. And this is if you're teaching at like a music school or a program. If you're teaching privately, you are eligible to get a lot more. So $40 or $50 an hour in New Zealand. And in America, you might get $60 or $70 an hour. So it can be actually, I don't want to say lucrative, because you still have to have a lot of students to make this work out, and it's not a stable salary or anything. And you have to have your own contracts and pay your own taxes, and it's basically your own business. So you still have to hustle a lot to make a livable salary just teaching private lessons. But as far as a comparative hourly job, compared to working at a grocery store or fast food for $10 an hour, or maybe these days I see signs for $15 an hour at fast food. $15 compared to $50 or $60 an hour is quite a substantial difference. And you can make, 3 times, 4 times the income. You can make what you would make in 4 hours at Chick-fil-A in 1 hour teaching a lesson. So that's the context, I guess, for my income, is that I was making a relatively high wage until I went to Pennsylvania. So in Pennsylvania, it was a small town. I was only there for a year, so it's kind of hard to pick up students. And I didn't have a car, and I had to find some kind of job to pay my way. I didn't have enough savings to live for the whole year without working, which was probably a mistake, but I really wanted to get to the US to do grad school. And I didn't want to have to do auditions flying from New Zealand. So I chose to do this year at Penn State because the viola teacher there is from New Zealand. And he's still one of the best teachers I've ever had to this day. So shout out to him at State College, Pennsylvania. But I had to work at a Panera that was within walking distance from my place that I was renting. I was renting a house with 3 other people. There were 4 rooms, and my rent was like $525 a month. And I worked at Panera to pay my rent, basically, and try to scrape together enough money to fly to do auditions. I did not have a credit card at this time. I don't think I could actually get one at this point either because I hadn't been in the US for very long after moving. So I didn't have that safety net of credit. I was making $9 an hour at Panera. I had to make the $525 a month each month from my rent, and I was going to school. As somebody doing a performance certificate, I didn't have to take academic classes, so my day started at like 2 or 3 o'clock at the school. So I did the opening bakery shift at Panera starting at 5 a.m. and I would walk there. And Pennsylvania has all 4 seasons, so sometimes I would be walking there in snow. There was one day in December, I think, where I was the only one who made it to work. And the night baker was there, but the managers had not made it because I was the only one walking and the roads were snowed in. So I had to call the night baker to let me in because the doors were still locked. And then I was actually on food stamps at that time. So I had the monthly supplemental food assistance, about like $200 a month for groceries. And with the amount of hours that I worked at Panera, I was making probably around $800 a month. My rent was $525. I had very little extra money, and I was spending a lot of time at Panera. So I was working a lot of hours, 5 days a week, starting at 5 a.m. What I would do is I would sleep in my work clothes. It was a black top and jeans, and I would just get up and go. Get up at 4:30, have 10 minutes to try to combobulate myself before going, and then do the walk. So I have had what I would consider, I guess I would call that financial hardship, because I don't want to say it's not a sustainable way to live, but it's a more difficult way to live. And that is the way some people live for all of their lives. I understand what it feels like. I did that for a year, and it can be really depressing. You have so little extra money, and so much of your life is spent doing a job that you don't really care about. It's not even necessarily fulfilling in any way. I will say that the people I worked with were really fun, and I made a lot of friends. I don't really keep in touch with any of them, but the work environment was fun, at least. And we had a sense of camaraderie at work. We're all kind of here doing the same thing, and we don't want to be here. We don't really want to be here doing what we're doing. And I had a decent social support network during that year, at least. So there's that. And I was super lucky in that despite all the stress and the fatigue of waking up at 4:30 in the morning, and I would sometimes play the local orchestra gigs as well, the community orchestras, and they would rehearse from like 7 to 10 p.m. or somewhere around those hours. So some days I would be done with my symphony work at 10 p.m., go home. Some of these places were up to an hour's drive away. I would carpool with my roommates because 2 of them were also musicians as well. Get back at 11 p.m. and go to sleep, having to get up at 4:30. So this was a rough year. I did manage to scrape together $1,200 to buy a used car in cash and get myself to the next destination. So here begins the Texas era. I have actually some physical pictures. It's not really going to show you anything. This is just a birthday card one of my friends got me. This is from my roommate at the time. So I auditioned for 3 schools: Juilliard, New England Conservatory, and Rice University. I didn't get into Juilliard. There was a little snafu with my pianist. They had the wrong edition for my concerto. I don't know that I would have gotten in anyway because it's so competitive and you just never know. But I did get into New England Conservatory and Rice University. New England offered me an $18,000 scholarship on $40,000 of yearly tuition. Rice University offered me a nearly full ride. I had to pay around $2,000 the first year, and then health insurance, which was around another $2,000 because my parents were not living in America and they did not have US health insurance. Other people could stay on their parents' plans until the age of 26, but I didn't have that luxury. I had to pay for the student health insurance plan. I got a job teaching at a music school. Between the Pennsylvania and Houston transition, I guess, I did a music festival over the summer in Miami. And I drove to Miami, did part of the festival, had a bad experience there. It was just extremely stressful, and the festival was very disorganized. I actually had a minor car accident while I was there as well, which just added a level of stress. I didn't have any money to repair the headlight on my car that got smashed. And I basically ended up leaving early and making my way to my friend in North Carolina. I was so lucky that I could stay there for the remainder of the time before I could head to Houston. And then I drove to Houston and got rid of the car. I was super stressed with that, and I didn't have the money to keep on paying for gas and insurance and all that. So I got a junkyard to take the car, and they gave me like $200 for it or whatever. And then I biked or took the light rail to school, and I took a bus to my teaching. And I was making, I believe, about $30 an hour because I was teaching for a music school. But it was something I could do without a car, and it was fairly reliable. So I taught a long day on Saturday and a Thursday evening. Through this, I was able to pay my rent, which was $500 in Houston, and I managed to have a little more extra money while I lived in Houston. So all throughout my years of studying, I did shop on some level. So the least shopping I would have done was in Pennsylvania just because I didn't have any money. And most of my time was so full. Through the hours working at Panera, the hours going to school, and the hours playing with the community orchestras. So I basically had zero time and zero money. I did not really shop that year. But the years before that in New Zealand, I had a little bit of extra income all the time. I would shop a lot at Lush. I would order clothes from fast fashion places. I would follow different fashion blogs. I even tried some DIY things. I sewed my own skirts. I basically didn't really have the knowledge to care about the quality of my clothes at that time. I think a lot of late teen, early 20s, young adults have yet to learn that. So I wore a lot of polyester. I didn't really shop very consciously, and I had a couple of nice pieces. So I had some New Zealand merino wool sweaters that were really, really nice that I wore to death, basically. I wore until they had holes in them, and I didn't know how to repair them at the time, so I regrettably don't still have those. I did some reselling and more shopping, therefore, on Trade Me, which is New Zealand's secondhand online store, I guess like their version of eBay. So I would sell basically anything that I was decluttering on Trade Me, get some money back, and then oftentimes I would shop on Trade Me again. And this is a pattern you'll see continuing throughout my life. So after New Zealand, I had the Pennsylvania year of not shopping, and then Houston, I kind of did a little bit of intermittent shopping. I started slowly creeping into better fashion. So right after my grad school degree finished at Rice University, I soon got a job. So I graduated in May, and then by October, I got my job with the Houston Symphony as one of their community embedded musicians. So I had a salary at this point, and I had also met my husband, and we got married in 2018. So he was doing a degree in trombone actually at the University of Houston at the time, and we kind of met through a mutual musical friend. I guess we kind of knew that we were going to be together forever fairly early on. We got married in the summer of 2018, and I graduated in May of 2018. I had met him in September of 2017. We wanted to have a wedding when we were ready to, I guess. We didn't want to have a real wedding right away, but we did want to get married right away. Why wait when you know, I guess. So we got married, and we're living together, and I got the job with the Houston Symphony. So I had a salary at this point. I also had kind of a more big girl job, so I started getting some nicer clothes. And then fast forward to 2020, and we all know what happened then. So I was laid off, and I actually was reemployed very quickly as a teacher. And this actually was a substantial raise for me. It was like $20,000 more. I think this was my highest salary ever at like $62,000 a year. And I also had the most formal dress code that I ever had. So you were supposed to wear a collared shirt every day and no jeans. So I kind of did a little shopping spree of like nicer stuff. I had also kind of been awakened to brands like Cezanne, other nicer stores through influencers online. So during my year as a teacher, I not only upgraded my wardrobe significantly, kind of spent a lot of money there, but I also paid off all my debt. So you win some, you lose some. Also kind of during this time, I think I got even more entrenched in online content. So, the years 2020 and beyond, I discovered a bunch of creators online, fashion creators, even slow living and minimalist creators. I was into that as well. I'm still into that, but I was very, very, very influenced. And when I can muster up the energy, I am going to do a video of everything I was influenced to buy and show you everything that I still have. And I think it's going to be a staggering amount that I was influenced to buy. Stay tuned. After that year of teaching, which was definitely an adventure, it was a departure from my intended career path of performing. And it was also an interesting year because half of the students were online, more than half actually, and just a small handful were in person. So I had to kind of design hybrid lessons, and I had never taught before in a classroom. So that was stressful, which probably also encouraged more shopping behavior just due to the stress. And then after that year, I already knew that I didn't want to stay in the classroom. I wanted to get back to my intended career of performing one way or another. And I had also had our first child. I forgot to mention that. Right before the year teaching, I had our first baby. That added a lot of new stuff to our lives. We bought a lot of things we didn't need to for the baby. It's just shopping that happens when you're a new parent. And it added a lot of stress, of course, because we had not had a baby together before, and now we did, and had to learn a whole bunch of new stuff on top of the job transition and on top of having to stay at home a lot more. So all of those things, I think I'm not the only one with this experience of the year 2020 kind of being a catalyst for a shopping problem. Let me know in the comments, actually, if you noticed your shopping habits get worse after this time. So 2020, and then after that year, we spent almost a year in Austin before my husband got the job that he has now that brought us to Omaha. And I'm extremely lucky that the Omaha Symphony had a viola opening when I got here. When we got here, actually, the first thing I did was have my second child in February, and then by April, I was already playing with the symphony. And I took an audition for a part-time contract, which I was very, I don't want to say lucky, because I've obviously done a lot of work up until this point on my music and trying to be a professional musician. But in some ways, winning a job with the symphony is luck. I've taken many, many, many auditions over the course of my life so far in New Zealand, in America, for many, many different orchestras, and I have not successfully won a job before Omaha. So I will say I was lucky to get this job. I have a really, really nice balance of work, life, or work and stay-at-home momming. So here we are in the Midwest, and we're finally getting more and more settled. So we have a house, we have jobs. I'm still taking auditions for better jobs in symphonies, which is still a source of minor stress. But I think I'm finally in a place where I'm able to reclaim my habits, my time, my routines, my goals, and kind of get myself to a place where I can stop the bad habits that I've started over the past maybe 5 years especially. So you could say I always kind of like to shop. I've always been interested in keeping up with trends and fitting in since I was in high school, since I was even before high school. But I didn't really develop the bad habits until the past, I would say 5 years is when it really got bad. I've never paid interest on a credit card. There were a couple of times we came close. Last Christmas actually was a little bit close because there was a lot of shopping that happened last year at the end of the year. And I think that end of year shopping was a little bit of a trigger or a wake-up call for me to really buckle down and change these habits. It was also getting less and less fulfilling for me, and the accumulation of more stuff was just causing more headache and frustration and problems. And my values are more in line with minimalism and simplicity than my actions are. So I actually want to decrease the amount of stuff that I have fewer nicer things, and not by buying things, by paring down so that the nicer things that I have take more of a spotlight. And my impulses to be looking for new things and buying things hopefully will go down as a result of appreciating the nice things that I already have. So the things that I want out of life now are wanting to be more present, just in general, also with my kids, wanting to travel, get back to that. I did more traveling before we had kids. I want to save for family road trips as well so that we can have some experiences like that and make some memories. I want to make sure we have an emergency fund so that, especially now that we have a house payment, we have a decent sized cushion. And I guess really, ultimately, I just want to be free from the social trend of consumerism. And now that I've stepped back, I can see how alarming this trend is becoming and how common it is to see creators constantly hauling new product, decluttering product, and having sponsorships or other means of influencing their audience, people who watch them, to buy stuff. And it's just insidious, and you don't really notice it unless you're not partaking in it, right? At least for me, I didn't notice it until I stopped partaking. And now when I think of all the stuff I'm gonna have to pile up for a video about all the stuff I was influenced to buy, I feel kind of embarrassed that I fell for it so many times. And it's just so strange. I want to go back to the way that I shopped as a kid, where there would be maybe 2 shopping trips for clothes every year, back to school, and then if you actually needed stuff. And I think a lot of the advice we see in the videos that come out these days about buying stuff or decluttering stuff or, fashion tips, things like don't buy things for occasions. I think actually buying things for occasions used to be okay because you didn't already have something for the occasion, right? So when you're in high school and you do your first ever orchestra concert, you might need to buy a black dress to wear because you don't already have one. Now we have so many options for fancy events that it would be ludicrous to buy something new for an occasion. Or, when you go on vacation to the beach, that might have been your first time to the beach, in which case it might be okay to buy a swim cover-up or something that you didn't need before, because you didn't already have an option. But now we're so inundated with options. The market is so saturated with options. And now the information about how there's enough clothing to clothe the next however many generations is becoming more widespread. And I'm just not okay with it anymore. I'm not okay with being a part of this consumerism society and contributing to the problems that especially the fashion industry causes when I have everything I need. So I've reached the breaking point. I'm ready to step back. I'm ready to start addressing the things that I've been ashamed of in the past. I want to start learning Korean for real so I can stop being ashamed of having pushed that away, that part of myself away when I was younger. I want to start taking care of my health and fitness, especially just exercising. And I want to be present and be there for my family and set them up with a healthy framework for living life where they don't fall into these traps. So I want to have my consumption figured out by the time they are even close to getting online or on social media. And I want to have my wardrobe system figured out so that I can model that for my kids. We have what we need and we don't have too much excess. And I can set up my part of the next generation to be more conscious and healthy and balanced in that way. In general, doing a no-buy year is such a privileged thing to be able to do, right? It's a problem that I have because of my privilege. And I guess maybe that's a good note to end this video on, because otherwise I don't know how I'm going to stop talking. But I've finally reached a stage where I'm happy to be me, I'm happy for my heritage, I'm happy to be myself, and I'm generally happy with my life. So now it's time to make my behavior line up with my values. I will see you in the next one, and thank you for being here. Bye for now.